Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Jesse's Occupational Awareness Channel. Happy Labor Day weekend to everyone. Hope y'all are all doing very well. It is an absolutely gorgeous day outside. I think it's about 70 degrees. Starting to get a little bit of that cooler weather going on here, and that's a good thing because AC unit just went out, but we're going to get that taken care of. Enough about me. Let's get into the content that you guys have all come here to hear. Today we're going to be talking about clashes with the instructors at the academy. We'll shift back to the academy for this video because it seems a lot of people like hearing about it, and I could go on and on about stories from that. So, put a little backstory with it. Who are the instructors at the academy? The majority of instructors that you're going to deal with are going to be sergeants. Every now and again, there's a lieutenant that's going to come in to teach a class, more so to supervise, and I believe it's overseen by a captain. So, the ones that I predominantly dealt with, Sergeant Norman, Sergeant Babcock, Sergeant Jones. Oh, I wish I could remember the lieutenant's name. Y'all have seen from my previous videos how bad I am about names. But let's get on into the topic. So, how do the instructors get to be instructors? Well, for starters, they hire on as corrections officers just like anybody else. They do the process, go on to whatever unit they're on, and at some point, they apply for the sergeant position. It'll get posted at the unit, it'll get posted on the TDCJ website, they put in for it, and they go through the process. I think they needed about 2 years, give or take, maybe more, minimum 2 years to even apply for the position. They would go sit down with the warden, the assistant warden, a panel of other supervisors, go through all the questions, and whichever one did the best, they were promoted to sergeant. Ceremony, pin on the chevrons, and then they would go back to the academy at whatever unit they were around, whichever one was closest to is what I mean. Excuse me. And they would go through a sergeant's course. I think it was 2 weeks long or so. And then they'd come back to the unit, and then they were the sergeants. So they did have experience. The way that they became instructors, a job opening will come up at one of the academies. Either Huntsville, Beeville, Rocheron. I'm not sure where the other ones are from there. Those are the three that predominantly came to mind. I went to the Huntsville unit. A job opening would come up. It would either post on the TDCJ website, or there would be a posting at the Human Resources office. And the sergeant would apply for it. It would say Corrections Division. It would say Training Division, Sergeant, Corrections Officer, and it would list which academy that they were needed at. They would apply for it, and I don't know what the process was. I wasn't an instructor at TDCJ. I just know they would apply for it, and whichever one was picked would go through an instructor course, and then they would be assigned at the academy. That was their permanent position from there. They didn't go to another unit and fill in as a supervisor. They didn't work at any other units. They didn't do transports. They were simply there for instructors. With that said, they did put their time in at units. They had to at least have 2 years. A lot of them had a lot more. The way you could tell seniority, one of the telltale signs that you could tell seniority from COs, on the sleeve, they would have this yellow stripe. It's supposed to be at a 45-degree angle. You would get one of those for every 5 years that they were there. It was affectionately called the French fry because it was yellow with a little bit of dark in the middle, but more so yellow. So the more French fries you had, the more time on the unit that you had experienced. So the instructors, they were experienced operators. They'd been to units, they'd worked, they knew what they were doing, and they had a curriculum that they had to teach. So what does that have to do with what I'm talking about right now? Every academy class that comes through is going to have what we call as instructors, I say we because I'm currently an instructor in the Coast Guard, problem children. Some people hire on because they actually want to do the job. Some hire on simply to hire on. I don't understand that motivation. To each their own. The classes in the academy were huge. When I went through, I want to say we started around somewhere 80 individuals, and it dwindled down fairly quickly for their own reasons. One of the big reasons was clashes with instructors. I don't know what the individuals thought they were getting into when they went to the academy. I'm not sure exactly why they had the motivations that they did. Think of it like you hire on at any other kind of a job. You go to work at a factory, or you go to work at a restaurant, and you meet your manager. And on the very first day, you're basically telling the manager they don't know what they're doing, they're better than them, this is how it should go. What do you think is going to happen at that job? You're probably not going to last past that first day. At least, not that first week, depending on the hiring procedures. That was the same way in the academy. There were so many cadets, and I'm going to talk about a couple of particular incidents. There were so many cadets that would just mouth off to the instructors, not listen to what they were told. It's like they didn't want to be there. They wanted to be there to collect a paycheck, but not to be there to get told what to do. Well, I'm sorry, you can't have it that way. When you hire on to a job, you have to conform to the standards of that job, or you're just not going to be there. You're going to get fired. I don't know if they thought they had some kind of a contract that made it to where they could do whatever they wanted to do, or just no discipline. It would be very similar to if you were in school, sitting in class, the teacher is trying to teach the lesson, and you keep interrupting the teacher, you try to interject your information. What's going to happen? The teacher's going to single you out, apply disciplinary procedures, and probably remove you from the class. At least when I went to school. I don't know how it is nowadays. So, how were these problem children dealt with? At first, they were told, hey, this isn't appropriate conduct here. You're here to do a job. You need to do the job from there. And then it would escalate from that point. So, let's get into a couple of specific individuals. Names that come to mind. Garcia. She was a retired Army. I don't know how old she was. She came off with this attitude of know-it-all, been there, done that, seen that. I've controlled troops in the field. I've been overseas. I got this kind of attitude. An individual like that, with experiences like that, you should let your actions speak for it. You shouldn't have to voice and vocalize them. This was the individual that couldn't go maybe 5 minutes without mentioning that she had been in the Army, for how long she had been in, what her rank was, and what she did. She was a cook. She was a cook in the Army, and she had hired on to be food service manager with TDCJ. She didn't get the position right away. She had to hire on as a CO, put her time in, and then she was going to go on to be food service manager. The only reason I knew that was because at some point I had a conversation with her and she had told me her long drawn out story. She would have a clash with the instructor when it came time for uniform fitting. We were all fitted for uniforms, they took our sizes, and the only reason I remember specifically her is as I was waiting in line, you could hear some voices start to increase. And the two female voices, they're very distinctive, of course. And you started to hear words from there. This is not right. You're taking the measurement wrong. I know what my size is. This isn't right. And then you could hear the instructor. This is how the sizing is. This is how you get measured. This is how you're going to be fitted. And the two started yelling at each other. And I remember stepping out of line and leaning forward and seeing Garcia and Sergeant Norman basically in each other's faces. The instructors were very distinguished. They wore gray trousers. The polo shirt that they wore, it was red. It had their chevrons up on it, had the patches. You could see them from a distance. They didn't blend in with anybody else because of the red shirts. And I believe they're the only ones allowed to wear red shirts at TDCJ. So they're in each other's faces, yelling at each other. At this point, it's like two cats going back and forth. You can't understand anything that they're saying, but you can certainly hear it. Sergeant Babcock ended up coming over, getting in between the two of them, going from there. Another one of the instructors, I don't remember which one, came over to us and started yelling at us to turn around, get to the back of the room, turn away, walk. So we all turned around, walked off. They were trying to keep us exposed to the situation that was going on. They ended up leaving the room. Here's what the situation was. Garcia thought that her clothes were getting fitted too big for her. Sergeant Norman, as I understood later on, said, I don't care if you don't think that you have thunder thighs. This is how you're going to get fitted. And what had upset Garcia was that term, thunder thighs. Now, that is inappropriate language, of course. However, in the penitentiary, you're going to hear a lot worse than that. So while Sergeant Norman was in the wrong for saying that, Garcia should have been mature enough to realize, hey, I'm going to work in a penitentiary. I'm probably going to hear a lot of obscenities. She might have just slipped up and been used to talking like this and have accepted it. At least she could have done what she was told to do, but she didn't want to do that. She wanted to try to be the one in charge, and the instructors are the ones running the show. Cadets do not run instructors. That's just not how it is. So, she ends up filing a formal complaint. I don't know how she did it. I don't know if there was an email sent, a phone call, or what, but Sergeant Norman actually came up for a review. We didn't see Sergeant Norman for about the next week and a half or so, and we didn't know why. She was on administrative leave for harassment of one of the cadets. Once all the interviews and everything were done and taken care of, Garcia, her career, it ended right then and there. Basically, even though Sergeant Norman had used inappropriate language toward her, because of her inability to follow directions and follow proper procedures, if you get fitted wrong, there is a process for that. She didn't follow that. She was fired within her first 2 weeks of hiring on with TDCJ. No food service manager, no nothing. And when you get fired like that, there's a clause that's put in that firing. Would you rehire this employee? No. If that's put there, you will never work for TDCJ again. That ended Garcia's career. Thanks. Bye. Glad I didn't have to work with you. The next one that we would have, there's always a class leader. Class leader is the one that when we get in formation outside and we're formed up, they're the one that's standing out in front of the class. They've already taken a roll call. Sergeant comes out, asks for the roll call number. The sergeant's going to do a count, double check on that. This particular individual, and it was kind of funny, he forgot to count himself. I don't remember how many of us there were. I believe at this point we were in the 70s. But I remember the instructor doing his count and going to the class leader, and you could hear them, their voices were pretty loud, telling him his count was wrong, recount. He goes back, and we were in rows, long rows, back of, I know there were at least 3. I don't know how long our rows were, but we went back in 3s, column of 3s. He counted again. Went back to Sergeant, gave him the count. Sergeant told him that was incorrect. This class leader, for whatever reason, tells the sergeant, "Your count's wrong. I know how many of us there are here." Sergeant just stares at him. Sergeant tells him, "You have one more time to recount this class." Turns around, counts again, gives him the same number. Tells the sergeant, "You must not know how to count. I've done this 3 times. I know what's going on." And at this point, we're kind of sitting there looking at each other like he's seriously not counting himself. We wanted to say something, but in formation, we couldn't talk. So we're just standing there. At this point, Sergeant looks at him and tells him, "You're 1 individual off." Class leader turns around, looks at everybody, looks back to the sergeant. "Everyone's here." Sergeant looks at him. "Have you counted yourself?" And at that point, it was like watching a balloon prick it with a pin, not enough to explode it, just watch it kind of slowly deflate. You could see the air deflating out of this individual. He gave him the proper count after that. Sergeant looked at him and said, "Come see me at the end of formation." "Aye, aye, Sergeant." He goes back in the building. Class leader turns to us, gives us the command to fall out. We all trickle into the building. Later on that day, there was a new class leader. Count is one of the most important things in the penitentiary. Count takes place a minimum, scheduled 7 times. It's absolutely imperative that every offender, every inmate, whatever you want to call them, is accounted for and is inside that facility. If count's wrong, that means there's potentially been an escape. And that's the absolute worst thing that can happen at the penitentiary. It's for one of these guys to get out, get back into the free world. So count is always priority. It starts in the academy. You count each other. That's where you start learning how to do it. Giving a false count or not doing the count right, or doing what's called a paper count, meaning you think you know how many inmates are in there and you just count it off on your sheet, that is one of the fastest ways to get fired. That would actually get a CO fired faster than not showing up for work. You at least got to come in and get accounted for. This would get COs walked off the unit faster than anything. So the sergeant was trying to make a point to that. This individual decides to get mouthy with the instructor. I'm fairly certain he didn't make it very long in TDCJ. Last story that we're going to have, prior service employee. When I say prior service employee, this lady, we'll call her Susan. She had worked in the mailroom previously. I believe it was at the Darren unit. I know the name. I don't know physically where in Texas it is. She had worked for quite a few years at the Darren unit as the mailroom. You only had to talk to her for about a minute. Sorry for my voice cracking. You only had to talk to her for about a minute before she would tell you she was mailroom and all the experiences that she had had with offenders. Well, me not knowing much about TDCJ, I figured since she had already been in the system, she was one of the most experienced individuals that there could be. Yeah. Most of them mailroom clerks don't leave the mailroom, don't have anything to do with inmates, don't even see inmates most of the time because they're stuck in that room, opening letters, filing them in, do their 8 hours and leave. For whatever reason, this individual thought that she was the warden of the facility that she had come from. She was the one that in class, when the instructor was given one of the instructions, let's say, for instance, it was about how to properly hand restrain an individual, she would call pause, try to interject her experiences that she had seen throughout the units, and offer her advice. Well, that's something you don't do. You don't stop the instructor in the middle of class, offer your advice, even if you may think it's better. They're teaching TDCJ policy, which is supposed to be followed if you want to be a CO at TDCJ. She was going back to work in the mailroom. Part of the class is going to be made up of civilian employees. Maintenance supervisor, locksmith technician, chaplain, mailroom. They have to go through the basic academy procedures, but once they get to the unit, they're not filling corrections officers' positions. They wear plain clothes. They can't show up in shorts and a t-shirt. Semi-business casual is what they would wear. They weren't considered security. Security was the COs. They were civilian personnel. She loved to try to interject her, at this point I'm just going to say made up experiences, because now I know, I didn't at the time, now I know she never worked with inmates. She had never worked with offenders. The only one she might have seen would have been the offender who probably showed up, who helped push the mail cart. They never gave the mail cart to the offender to take off on their own, because there's no telling where that mail would have ended up. So they could help push the cart, but it was going to have to be supervised by one of the mailroom clerks until the CO took over on the evening shift to distribute it out from there. So like I say, I didn't know she didn't have these experiences, but she certainly liked to talk like she did. I'm fairly certain she was living vicariously through stories that she had heard. Where she would get these stories from, there were OJT cadets that would work in the mailroom, also officers that were on some kind of light duty. They had either fallen down the stairs, gotten into a fight with an offender and were injured, car accident, something. They weren't able to return to full duty and couldn't be assigned to buildings. They could go to the mailroom and they could help out with the ladies opening the mail. And usually there was always at least one, if not 2 to 3 of those individuals, at least at the Styles unit where I worked at, working in the mailroom, waiting out their light duty time. I guess they would tell stories. I don't know how they would get started, but it came to me later on that, yeah, she's putting herself in this officer's position and retelling these stories as if they're her own, which they weren't. They were. She was lying about being in these situations, and it didn't take quite a while into the academy. Sergeant Babcock actually called her out in one of the classes. We were having a class on administrative segregation where they're explaining the procedures, and she had raised her hand up and started trying to tell a story about when she had gone in. And Sergeant Babcock, I'll always remember it, goes, hold on, Susan. Hold on right there. 1 second. You were assigned to the mailroom, correct? You realize segregation has its own separate mailroom, and it's not clerks that work in there. It's actual COs that sort the mail out from there. So were you in the mailroom, or were you a CO assigned to segregation? And here we go. Well, you see, that was one of the days that they were short on one of the mailroom clerks, and I had been asked if no, stop right there. Nobody fills in for seg in inventory, the chow hall, mailroom, or medical. Nobody. It's only other COs, and very rarely that fill in for segregation. So at what point were you assigned to segregation? Well, you see, there was you know what? Go ahead and stop right there. Your stories are lies. You're a liar. You just need to stop right here and now. She got up out of her seat, walked out of the room. I never saw her again. I don't know if she went to one of the supervisor's office, if she went to the parking lot and left, or what. But Sergeant Babcock had had enough of her lies and stories and finally decided to call her out. Moral to that story: don't pretend to be something that you're not when you're going through the academy or TDCJ or really any job from there. I know this video has been a little bit of my rambling. I do apologize for that. I try to keep them short and get to the point. It's just when I start having a flood of memories, they just all come back, and I just love telling these stories. So, with that said, going through the academy, just be who you are, be the cadet, get what needs to be done, get out on the unit, and be that best CO. I'll always remember these experiences because that let me know that they were embarrassing. It let me know I don't ever want to be that individual. So, yeah, that's what happens when you clash with the instructors at the academy. It's not going to end well, and it's not going to help your career out. It's probably going to bring the career to an end. Folks, I really hope y'all have enjoyed this video. Appreciate you taking the time to watch it to the end. If you have, shout out to you. Good luck to everybody who's pursuing this career. Hope y'all are all safe. Take care of each other. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Everyone take care of themselves. I appreciate every one of you. Thanks.